I'm driving so fast because I'm so excited.
It's an entrance. We can see an entrance.
I have just been told that they have found something.
Oh my gosh.
A sphinx.
Here we see Cleopatra as the goddess Isis.
For 2,000 years, humanity has believed that Queen Cleopatra vanished forever. Mainstream history maintains that she took her own life as her empire collapsed, and that her body was later swallowed by catastrophic earthquakes and dragged beneath the waters of the Mediterranean. But that assumption has just fractured on the edge of the desert beneath the ruins of the Taposiris Magna temple. A military radar system swept across layers of limestone and returned a signal that stunned investigators. It did not reveal solid rock, it revealed empty space, an engineered network of tunnels descending toward a massive underground void, and what lies beneath bears a direct and unsettling connection to Cleopatra. This evidence does more than challenge the historical record. It suggests that her death was not a desperate end, but a calculated design far more deliberate and more disturbing than legend has ever allowed. Alexandria and the Lost Royal Tomb. The story of ancient Egypt's final chapter has always begun and seemingly ended in a single place, Alexandria. Founded more than 2,300 years ago by Alexander the Great, this great port city once stood as the beating heart of the ancient world. It was here that the Ptolemaic dynasty, the last Greek pharaohs, ruled Egypt through 3 centuries of brilliance and bloodshed. And it was here that the final queen, Cleopatra II, lived, fought, and was believed to have died. According to Roman historians and a scholarly consensus that has endured for millennia after her military defeat by the forces of Octavian in 30 BCE, Cleopatra and her lover Mark Antony chose death over the humiliation of being paraded through Rome. History tells us their bodies were hastily buried within a royal mausoleum inside the palace complex of Alexandria. A tragic ending, yet a decisive one. But the Alexandria of today is not the Alexandria of the past. The ancient city fell victim to the raw power of geology in the 4th and 8th centuries. CE, a series of violent earthquakes and tsunamis battered the Egyptian coast. Much of the royal quarters, including palaces, libraries, and tombs, collapsed and sank beneath the harbor waters. Dr. Ross Thomas of the British Museum and Professor Imad Khalil of Alexandria University have devoted much of their careers to surveying this submerged world. Their work resembles an attempt to reassemble a colossal painting that has been torn apart and hurled into a washing machine. Beneath the murky waters of the Mediterranean lies an architectural graveyard, thousands of scattered limestone blocks, red granite columns weighing dozens of tons snapped in half, fragments of the legendary Pharos lighthouse, and Sphinx statues eroded by salt and current. Underwater survey data paints a picture of total destruction. The geological layers that once held the remains have been violently disturbed by seismic forces and surging water. No structure stands intact. Everything has been crushed, scattered, and buried beneath meters of sediment. The logical conclusion accepted by the global archaeological community is stark. If Cleopatra's tomb ever stood here, nature has erased it forever. No one could survive such a catastrophe, and no tomb could remain whole through devastation on this scale. This consensus, though pessimistic, offers a certain scientific comfort. It explains why one of history's most famous figures has no known grave. It allows us to close the case under the category of unavoidable loss. We did not fail to find her because of incompetence. The ocean chose to conceal her, and so the story of Cleopatra has long been considered finished at the bottom of the sea. Yet the calm certainty of this theory is about to fracture under a question few have dared to ask. Could a woman as intelligent and politically meticulous as Cleopatra, who calculated every move of her life, truly have allowed her death to unfold in chaos and without preparation? The Taposiris Magna hypothesis. The reassurance offered by the sunken tomb theory began to show serious cracks when researchers shifted their gaze away from the coast of Alexandria and toward the western desert. A bold and controversial hypothesis emerged proposed by Kathleen Martinez, a criminal defense attorney turned archaeologist. Her approach did not rest on geology. It was built on psychological profiling and theology. Kathleen's argument targets the weakest point of the old narrative: passivity. Cleopatra was not a victim. She was a pharaoh for an Egyptian pharaoh. Preparation for death outweighed even the business of living. The ultimate goal was not burial, but rebirth. To achieve rebirth, a ruler had to be interred in a sacred place connected to the gods, not in a hurried grave within a besieged palace. Cleopatra saw herself as the earthly embodiment of the goddess Isis. According to ancient religious logic, she would have to be buried in a temple of Isis. Attention turned to Taposiris Magna, a site located about 50 kilometers west of Alexandria. For decades, it had been dismissed as an unremarkable Roman ruin, yet a closer look revealed striking anomalies. Taposiris Magna was no ordinary temple. Its name means Great Tomb of Osiris. In Egyptian mythology, Osiris was the husband of Isis and the lord of the underworld. If Cleopatra was Isis incarnate, then choosing to rest beside Osiris within this temple would have been the most logical step in completing a divine reunion. Physical evidence began to reinforce this psychological profile at the excavation site. Kathleen's team uncovered a neglected treasure trove of data, more than 200 royal coins. These were not stray pieces of currency. They bore the unmistakable portrait of Cleopatra and her name. Their concentrated presence at a remote temple suggests a direct link between the queen and this site. She had been here. She had invested in this place. A more unsettling clue emerged from the surrounding burials as archaeologists expanded their investigation beyond the temple walls. They discovered an extensive cemetery of elite mummies. What struck them was the orientation of the graves. Instead of facing east toward the rising sun or toward Alexandria, many tombs were deliberately aligned toward the temple of Taposiris Magna. Like subjects assembled around the palace of their ruler, these dead seemed to be looking towards something profoundly sacred concealed within or beneath the temple. At the same time, in a swan 500 meters to the south, Dr. Alejandro Jimenez Serrano was excavating the necropolis of Kubet el Hawa. His discoveries provide crucial context for literary practices during the TMIC period. He uncovered remarkably well-preserved mummies, their faces covered with finely crafted cartonnage masks, gilded and painted with protective symbols. The survival of these intact aristocratic tombs demonstrates an essential fact. Not all late-period burials were looted or destroyed. Egyptians of this era retained sophisticated knowledge of how to conceal and safeguard their dead. If local officials in Aswan could construct such secure resting places, then a queen who commanded the full resources of an empire would almost certainly have devised a burial plan far more elaborate, complex, and secretive. Taposiris Magna is no longer a random ruin. It begins to resemble a carefully staged scene, one that may have been designed to misdirect history itself. The shaft, the tunnels, and the flooding. The hypothesis was in place, but the evidence lay buried deep underground. The investigation moved from textual analysis to high-risk fieldwork at Taposiris Magna. Kathleen Martinez and her team identified a geological feature that did not belong to nature, a sharply cut opening in the bedrock just outside the temple wall. This was no sinkhole. It was the mouth of a vertical shaft descending straight into the earth. Reaching it felt like stepping into a trap set by time itself. After 2 millennia, the limestone had grown brittle and unstable. Workers labored under extreme danger, hauling debris upward with rudimentary pulley systems while the constant threat of collapse loomed overhead. Every meter excavated was a wager against gravity. At roughly 6 meters below the surface, the darkness began to yield its first secret. An artificial tunnel system emerged. These were not natural caverns. The walls had been carved smooth. The ceilings were deliberately reinforced, evidence of advanced engineering skill. Constructing such passages would have required thousands of hours of manual labor in cramped spaces with limited light and air. Someone had invested immense effort in building this subterranean maze. Just as excitement reached its peak, a silent guardian intervened. Water. The tunnels were flooded. Groundwater had risen, black and frigid, sealing off further progress. This was not a shallow pool, but a genuine hydrological barrier. Kathleen's team brought in high-capacity pumps, racing against time to drain the passageways. The engines roared across the desert silence, yet the water receded stubbornly as though the temple itself resisted surrendering its secrets while waiting for the water level to drop. Further context about elite burial practices emerged from Aswan. Alejandro Jimenez Serrano turned to modern medical technology to examine mummies without disturbing their wrappings inside a local hospital beneath the stark glow of fluorescent lights. CT scanners began slicing through the ancient bodies layer by layer. The results were astonishing. Beneath the faded linen, these were not merely dry skeletons. Alejandro identified scarab amulets placed precisely over the heart. The scarab symbolized rebirth, and its underside often bore spells from the Book of the Dead, instructing the heart not to betray its owner during judgment before Osiris. Some mummies even contained gold tongues positioned within the mouth, a ritual device meant to allow the deceased to speak before the gods. These details reveal an intense spiritual preparation. Death was not an ending, but a perilous journey requiring protection, tools, and guidance. If an unnamed noble received such meticulous care, then what layers of ritual defense would have guarded Cleopatra, a queen who declared herself divine? Back at Taposiris Magna, when the water finally receded enough to wade through, Kathleen entered the tunnel's darkness for the first time. The air was heavy with dampness and history. Flashlight beams swept across slick stone walls. The passage did not end in a simple chamber. It branched. One corridor ran north, another south. The complexity confirmed that this was no accidental cavity or drainage system. It was a deliberate labyrinth. Its design suggested misdirection, a structure meant either to confuse intruders or to shield a central core buried deeper still. Ground-penetrating radar and the subterranean void. The resistance of the physical environment forced a change in strategy. Traditional excavation had reached its limits. Kathleen turned to a technological ally, often associated with military reconnaissance. Ground-penetrating radar, or GPR, this system typically used to detect hidden bunkers or buried weapons caches, was now aimed at the stone floor of an ancient temple. GPR operates by transmitting high-energy radio waves into the ground. When those waves encounter materials or voids of different density than the surrounding rock, they bounce back, creating a three-dimensional map of what lies below. Tension filled the command tent as technicians moved the radar array across the temple courtyard. Every eye locked onto the monitor. Data appeared first as streaks and bands of color, the chaotic signature of natural limestone, then directly beneath the temple's central sacred axis. The wave pattern shifted abruptly. The screen revealed a distinct anomaly. The contours sharpened into geometric lines, forming right angles that nature does not produce. The radar had detected empty space. What stole the breath from everyone present was its scale. This was no minor cavity or narrow tunnel like those already explored. Measurements indicated a massive subterranean chamber approximately 10 meters long and up to 30 meters wide, resting at a depth between 20 and 30 meters below the surface. A void the size of a small building suspended within solid rock. Its existence was a cognitive shock. From an architectural and geological perspective, carving such an immense hall beneath a temple foundation would demand extraordinary engineering. Thousands of tons of limestone would have been removed. The ceiling would require reinforcement strong enough to bear the weight of the temple above, and all of it would have been executed in secrecy. There is no practical reason for constructing such a chamber unless it was meant to safeguard something priceless, something that required complete separation from the world above. A reservoir would not need such depth or concealment. A shelter would not be placed beneath a sacred sanctuary. The dimensions and placement align precisely with what one would expect from a royal tomb, a house of eternity. The long-accepted theory of a tomb lost beneath the waters of Alexandria collapses under this empirical evidence. Cleopatra is not resting beneath the cold sea. She may lie suspended within an engineered void, sealed by stone and water, directly beneath the feet of those searching for her. This chamber could be the forgotten room that history overlooked for 2,000 years. Cleopatra's divine identity and the tomb design. The discovery of the vast underground void was more than an archaeological milestone. It forced a redefinition of what we are truly confronting. If this is indeed the tomb of Cleopatra, it resembles nothing found in the Valley of the Kings. The unease begins when the physical structure is placed beside Cleopatra's theological worldview. To understand this shift, we turn to the work of epigraphers such as Dr. Colleen Darnell and Professor John Darnell at the Temple of Dendera, hundreds of miles to the south. Cleopatra left behind a declaration carved in stone. On the rear wall of the sanctuary, she did not portray herself as a monarch ruling mortals. She depicted herself as Isis. She wears the horns and solar disk crown of the goddess, holds the ritual scepter, and performs offerings to other deities as their equal. John Darnell draws attention to a chilling aspect of her reported death. Tradition claims she ended her life through the bite of a venomous cobra. In modern Western thought, this is framed as an act of despair, yet within Egyptian symbolism, the cobra is Wadjet, the protective goddess who spits fire at the enemies of the pharaoh. The cobra does not represent annihilation, it represents transformation and ascent. Its bite is not an ending, but a passage from mortal flesh to divine state. When this symbolic logic is applied to Taposiris Magna, the underground void ceases to be a resting place. It becomes a spiritual mechanism. The temple above honors Osiris. The chamber below may hold Cleopatra as Isis. The structure mirrors the central myth of Egyptian rebirth, in which Isis reassembles the body of Osiris in the underworld to restore him to life. Cleopatra appears to have designed her tomb as a physical model of the Duat, the realm beyond death. This perspective reframes the flooded tunnels and branching corridors. They are not engineering failures in Egyptian cosmology. Entry into the afterlife required passage across dark waters and through guarded gates. The water-filled tunnels may have been a deliberate architectural echo of that journey. The unsettling element lies in the purpose of the design. Cleopatra did not retreat here to sleep. She withdrew to continue her reign in another form. Protecting her body from Roman defilement was not an act of fear, but of preservation, safeguarding the sacred vessel of her divine identity. The void was conceived as a sealed sanctuary, a space where time itself was suspended and ritual transformation could unfold eternally. We are not standing before a conventional archaeological site. We may be standing before a ritual engine set in motion 2,000 years ago, still sealed in darkness, technical failure, and excavation restrictions. Just as anticipation reached its height when the tomb seemed within reach and modern science appeared poised to claim victory, reality intervened with the force of a defensive mechanism embedded within history itself. The excavation at Taposiris Magna encountered an invisible yet immovable barrier, the limits imposed by both material endurance and human authority. First came the resistance of the environment. After days of continuous operation to keep the tunnels dry, the pumps began to fail. In this remote desert location, electrical supply was unstable. The generator sputtered and fell silent. Without mechanical support, groundwater returned immediately. In the darkness, the water level rose with quiet determination, reclaiming the ground that had just been won. The partially revealed path toward the chamber disappeared once more beneath black water. Then came the administrative constraint. Kathleen Martinez's excavation permit had an expiration date. Egyptian heritage authorities, bound by strict conservation policies, required work to cease at the end of the season. No exceptions were granted, even with a potentially historic discovery at stake. Time, the oldest adversary of archaeology, had run out. The team dismantled its equipment. A profound sense of frustration settled over the site. The three-dimensional map of the chamber remained on their computer screens. They knew its dimensions. They knew its position. 10 meters in length, 30 meters in width, directly beneath their feet, yet it remained untouchable. This enforced pause created a deeper unease. There seemed to be an uncanny alignment between natural forces and bureaucratic regulation, both converging to prevent the final unveiling. Excavating further without careful reinforcement risked destabilizing the entire temple above, potentially collapsing the monument and burying both history and those who sought it. Geological reality and institutional caution appeared to cooperate in preserving the seal. We were permitted to glimpse her shadow through radar data, but not to stand before her in physical form, the sealed chamber beneath Taposiris Magna. In the end, the answer to one of Egyptian archaeology's greatest mysteries is not the dramatic image of a golden coffin lifted into daylight beneath a storm of camera flashes. The answer resides in the haunting silence of radar imagery and the quiet movement of water through darkened tunnels. We have located the tomb, the anomalous void, its strategic placement beneath the temple of Osiris, the theological alignment with Isis, and the concentration of coins bearing Cleopatra's likeness form a body of evidence too substantial to dismiss. Yet the most striking evidence is its inaccessibility. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh, may have secured a final victory. She selected a burial place and design that even 21st century technology cannot penetrate. She did not choose a towering pyramid destined to attract plunder. She did not choose a valley tomb vulnerable to intrusion. She chose the earth, the water, and the protection of a complex geological system. She does not lie lost beneath the open sea as once imagined. She rests within a cold engineered void enclosed by dark water beneath the desert of Taposiris Magna. The truth that emerges from this investigation is sobering. Some doors are not meant to be opened. The chamber may contain treasures, a preserved body, and priceless historical insight, yet it also contains the deliberate will of the past. The radar detected emptiness, but that emptiness speaks. It suggests she remains present, yet beyond the domain of the living, Cleopatra endures in darkness, secured within her architecture of rebirth. The silence of the radar is its own message, a reminder that the ancient world still guards powers we may observe from a distance but cannot claim. Perhaps allowing her to remain within that eternal water shadow is the greatest respect history can offer its final queen.